So hi everyone, I'm John Gostick. I'm the technical lead for digital preservation at Cambridge University Library. Um, and this presentation is about a little bit of an insight into how we've built our digital preservation service using Fedora 6. It's an ongoing process, but we are more than halfway through now. So what is the DPS? So it's our digital preservation service. It's a working title, may change. It's part of our 5-year digital preservation program here at the University Library. And in simple terms, the program goals are just to get everything that we have into one place, make it searchable and discoverable, and crucially keep what we have as safe as possible for as long as possible in the most sustainable way and ensuring that the files and documents that we have can continue to be read well into the future. The system we've built has a very simple conceptual model. We are acquiring stuff from various sources, packaging it up, bringing it through standardized ingest workflow into a core repository from where we send it to preservation, as in put it in preservation storage, and the core repository can then be accessed, and we have an administration layer, which I will come to later. How this looks in a little bit more detail. You can see, I won't go through it all again, but you can see some of the different sources we have. In terms of acquisition services, the one thing we've already brought in is part of our institutional repository, also known as Apollo, and 2 new services we built under the program: the transfer service for extracting things from carriers, disks, older media that we have in our collections, and a deposit service, which is a sort of fully digital deposit service for people to make donations or deposits with our archivists. The repository, as you can see there, is based on Fedora 6, and we are using the supporting components of Solar and Camel Toolbox, etc. The copy to preservation storage that leans heavily onto the OCFL, so we're copying what goes into Fedora basically. If it's not in the immutable head, if it's been versioned, it basically then gets copied to these other locations. And to maximize the resilience, we've got diversity of both vendor and cloud platforms. Oh, and I should have mentioned this at the start. This whole thing is cloud native as much as possible. It's built on the cloud, and it's either uses serverless architectures or services running on the cloud platform. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the ingest workflow. So what does that do? I won't read through them all, but it unpacks things. So any embedded containers, for example, tar.gz, zip files that are included in a submission, they get fully extracted out to a configurable level. For file format identification, we're using Siegfried, PAM AV for antivirus, and then all metadata, both supplied in the submission and derived from those services, is stored in the Fedora repository after the supplied checksums are validated. And we also do things like assign a unique identifier to each invocation of that workflow and store that alongside it. Again, I won't go into a lot of detail here. There's a handy QR code there if you are interested in how this is built, but it's a sort of cloud-based serverless architecture. One of the benefits of this is that we're only basically consuming resources like compute, etc., when we're processing things. So this automatically spins down when it's not in use, which is really nice because it's not costing us any money. The core of it is built using an AWS, that's Amazon Web Services, one of the major cloud providers. It's built using a service within that called Step Functions, which is a nice workflow orchestrator, and it allows you to tie together a lot of the services that are on that platform along with custom code. The resultant package at the end of all that processing, we are storing as an archival group in Fedora in a single atomic transaction. So if for any reason that fails, in principle, it should revert to the attempted changes, and we won't get left with a submission to the repository in an inconsistent state or sort of partially submitted state. And the workflow is also intelligent enough to allow that to be retried, etc. So why did we choose Fedora 6? This is probably of interest. So as the library is an institution, we are new adopters. So this is all a nice, clean slate, brand new build. So we don't have any of the legacy baggage that a lot of you do in terms of having to migrate from earlier versions. So that makes it a lot easier to experiment and try new things. Um, the drivers were, well, included things like the fact it being standards based and open source. There's nothing proprietary. We're also intending to open source most of the work we're doing around this when we're done ourselves. So that ties in nicely with that. The development team themselves are very supportive and responsive. OCFL was a big draw, just leading on from Neil's presentation. And the fact we can run it on S3 was really useful to us as well with our drive to host this on AWS's cloud. And within OCFL, the fact that we can using archival groups, which is a Fedora construct, it keeps things together on disk, and we feel it's very human readable. So even if you completely lost or stripped away this application layer, you would still be able to make some sense of what's left on the disk. We've also leaned quite heavily on the mutable head extension within the OCFL spec, which again Fedora supports, to allow us to do an element of appraisal before things get versioned and effectively preserved in our world, allowing for things like actual removal of files that we don't want to preserve long term. I won't go into that too much detail, conscious of time, but again, that's just showing how we've deployed Fedora on the cloud, which may be of some interest. Nothing too advanced there. We're basically using customized versions of the images, which are, I think, the official published images. And we're running it in a service called ECS, or Elastic Container Registry, which is what's called a container orchestration service. It's relatively simple at the moment. We're probably going to make this more resilient and build it out as we go, and we get more experience with it. We did find, I guess, for those that are familiar with the terminology and the service, that we're running this on EC2 rather than Fargate because I think the costs were better for things that are longer running. So, oh, sorry, just one more thing on that. So all of those container tasks are also running in a private network called a VPC on the cloud. So how do we actually get to that? Well, we do this using our custom user interface, currently called the Workbench. This is a user-facing, fairly lightweight web application. It's hosted in an S3 bucket. It's built using Vue 3 and Vuetify, which I think are JavaScript UI frameworks. As mentioned on the slide, it's currently sort of an alpha state, pre MVP. It is functional. Doesn't quite do everything we need it to do. Still a bit clunky, but it's evolving fast and it's starting to do what we need, which is good. There's also a repository API which sits between Fedora and the front end web application. So everything goes through that, and that takes care of enforcing authentication, authorization, etc. So we're not exposing Fedora directly to the public internet. It has to go through, all requests have to go through this API gateway. We also take the approach of using triples with our own internal schema as I've said system flags there, but perhaps workflow flags would be a better terminology. So, for example, we're using it to flag if there's been changes since the last time we made a version, if it's going to be appraised by someone on our archivist team who it's assigned to, that sort of thing, in addition to sort of the usual administrative, technical, descriptive metadata and so on. We chose to build our own user interface for a number of reasons, and this goes back a little way now, but at the time, I'm not sure what the current state is, but I don't think Samvera or Islandora supported Fedora 6. Feel free to tell me differently. But it also allows integration with the other services and components that we've built, so we have everything through one interface. So we're not just talking to Fedora and the API, we've got other other things spread around this deployment, which we are bringing in through one single interface. Yeah, okay. So what's that user interface do? It allows us to sign in, sign out at a very basic level, manage the pre-mentioned ingest workflow, run reports, search what's actually in the Fedora repository, and a particular area of focus at the moment is appraisal. So again, I won't go through everything on that list, but it allows us to do things like edit the data that's already in there, flag, oops, sorry, hang on, my machine's doing something strange, bear with. Yeah, flag files that might be infected if a virus has been detected, highlight things like system and 0 byte files, duplicate files, change the arrangement, soft deletion, audit logging, etc. A quick peek at what it currently looks like, just comparing it side by side with the sort of the default HTML view of the Fedora API. Is this a video? Yes, it is. Couldn't remember. And this is a very short recording of how it currently looks, if we can get it to play. There we go. So we've just signed in there. We're going to search an item. Item translates to archival group. We're storing everything as archival groups. We're probably going to change that terminology to package. The search has been made. Item/package is opened up. It's a little slow in this video because it's still our dev system. At the moment, we just have a fairly crude list of metadata fields or triples that this is going to be completely overhauled shortly. We have an audit log, which again is like a log triple. The children of the archival group are appearing in a file listing below. And we're making use of Solr to highlight whether to check some duplicates across the repository. That's it. So it was very short and sweet. Back to the thingy. And then, oh, sorry, there we go. Oh, I think I had one more video. Sorry, I do apologize. There we go. So just touching on some of the appraisal features. This video is actually a little out of date now, so we've actually added a lot since I recorded this. But a similar thing. The all items on the left basically is a pre-saved search for anything with the appraisal required flag. That's how that item was located. The highlighting there is showing where the value of that triple has changed since the last full version was taken. Imagine that something's been preserved and then you've come along and made some changes. The audit log there, this is a test item, so it's very, very verbose and it's very, very long, but you can see the idea is that things come in for appraisal and things can be rearranged, items deleted. That's all tracked from the moment it enters the system. We have soft deletion there, so flagging a file for deletion, which will be enforced when that thing is actually versioned or preserved. And again, that's just showing the duplicate file listing. So, like I say, it's quite early days. This is developing quite fast, but we will hopefully, next time I do one of these, I'll show you a much more fully featured and polished UI. And on that note, sorry, I've slightly gone over my time, but thank you for listening. Yeah, any questions, I would imagine I was going to direct them to the chat. Feel free to email me on that address, and that blog post and the QR code is there if you would like to have a deeper dive on the ingest workflow I mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks, John. That's awesome. And you're not overtime. Remember, it was me that was overtime. So you're.
Fair enough.
If there's any questions, we'll wait 1 minute and then we'll see if there's any. I can take QA, community Q&A. Oh, Josh has a question.
Yeah, just a very quick one, actually. Did I hear correctly that you're you're doing a single deposit into Fedora, so you don't have use of transactions. There's a transaction extension, I believe, and it's become an extension in Fedora 6, I believe, but you're not using that. Is that right?
Well, my understanding is it's kind of a core part of Fedora, but either way, it's certainly part of the API which we use for Fedora. And yes, the ingest workflow I mentioned, one of the key things that does is before it actually submits everything it's got after processing, it opens a transaction. It does all of the, creates the archival group, puts the binaries in, adds the metadata, completes the transaction. And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
either it all succeeds or nothing succeeds. And if it doesn't succeed, that same workflow then alerts us to that and keeps it in a state where we can retry it. So we're not losing the submission.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we also make heavy use of the transaction, so
Okay.
I'm glad to hear there's other use case because it did, I think, get made an API extension or an API, an optional part of the API. It's not core or something anymore. So, but
Yeah,
we're
I think
heavy
it's got
users
its
of
own
that. Very
endpoint or
useful.
something. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. We got time for one more, Harry, from Bridget?
Yeah, we'll take it. We'll take it quickly.
Thanks. Just a quick question. When you talk about open sourcing it, are you talking about open sourcing everything, including like all your Terraform scripts and everything that's like the whole framework, or are you talking about open sourcing specific pieces of it?
The intention is to do basically everything, yeah. And yeah, sorry, you mentioned Terraform there. I didn't specifically mention that, but everything we've built is done using Terraform, which is what's called infrastructure as code. So the idea is you could take this Terraform script with your own AWS account and basically then within a few minutes have everything which we've deployed. And that's something we make use of heavily. It's a very excellent tool for infrastructure as code generally. It's for spinning up additional environments and tracking changes and everything, which would be a nightmare, to be honest, with the way the cloud is if you were doing it all manually.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.